Thank you, President King,
Welcome.
Pro Tem Bennett, members of council. Mayor Bach couldn't be here today. He's with the governor this afternoon. I think they went somewhere south in the state. But he wanted me, he developed this proclamation. He asked that I would read that to council today, with the understanding that this IG is under the purview of the city council. So I'll just read it. El Paso County has asked the City of Colorado Springs Council to approve an intergovernmental agreement that would create a Pikes Peak Regional Drainage Authority, including the county, Colorado Springs, Fountain, Green Mountain Falls, and Manitou Springs. I wholeheartedly support regional collaboration on stormwater as long as the approach is fair to everyone involved. I believe this IGA is not fair to the citizens of Colorado Springs. The new authority will grow the size of government with a new separate legal entity imposing essentially what is the same as a permanent tax, though the county is calling this new charge a fee on all real properties, including residential, commercial, nonprofits, including schools and churches, and military installations for 20 years. For the initial 20 years of the authority, the proposed fee of $92.40 per year for the average residential property is 77% higher than the $52.20 imposed by the city's former stormwater enterprise several years ago. The new $92.40 stormwater fee is about the same amount the average residential property owner now pays for all city services combined, including police, fire, parks, streets, and transit. The IGA allows the authority to increase fees in the future without voter approval and enables the authority to borrow money without voter approval. Although the IGA states that fees collected would be reduced after 20 years by 55%, with 45% continuing indefinitely without voter approval. The IGA empowers the authority participants to extend the full fee indefinitely beyond 20 years without voter approval. This will effectively bypass the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, otherwise known as TABOR, amendment to the Colorado State Constitution. If the city determines in future years that its priorities for stormwater projects within the city limits should be reordered based on changing conditions, the city must first obtain approval of a supermajority of the authority board, which has no obligation to grant such approval. Should the city wish to manage the completion of projects strictly within the city, either with its existing public works staff or outside contractors again, a supermajority of the authority board must approve but has no obligation to do so. In the event of a flood emergency strictly within the city limits, the IGA gives the authority and not the city the right to determine whether funds contributed by Colorado Springs residents will be used to address the city's emergency needs. A supermajority of the authority board must approve a return to the city of the fees paid by the city residents into the authority's emergency reserve, but the board has no obligation to do so. At least one of two county commissioners of the authority must vote as part of the supermajority to approve all major decisions of the authority, including returning to Colorado Springs significant portions of the fees paid by the citizens of Colorado Springs, which effectively results in a one-vote veto power. The authority will retain from total fees collected a 1% or approximately $390,000 plus or minus management fee for administrative costs, and the county appears poised to collect a 1.5% or $600,000 plus or minus administrative fee annually for adding one line to their property tax bills for the stormwater charge. Together, these overhead charges add up to over $20 million for the first 20 years of the authority, with the vast majority of the funding coming from the Colorado Springs citizens. While he acknowledges City Council's purview to determine the funding source for the city stormwater needs, he respectfully asks that it modify the IGA as follows. Number one, sunset the IGA after 10 years, similar to the original Pikes Peak Rural Transit Authority, unless extended by the voters in the future. Two, reduce the residential fee so that the average property owner's cost is fixed for 10 years at $52.20 per year, $435 per month, while similarly reducing fees for all other property types. And number three, allow any fee increase or borrowing only if approved by voters within its boundaries. And number five, limit the authority's administrative fee to 1/2 of 1% and the county's fee collection charge to 1/2 of 1%. And he signed that today, August 26, 2014. Mayor Steve Bach. Thank you, President.
Thank you. Any comments from council? Councilmember Miller.
Well, I'd like to address a few of the things in the mayor's proclamation. I find it somewhat ironic that he cites the growth of government that will handle public works that affect the health and safety of our citizens, but he has no problem spending thousands investigating the expansion of government to own and maintain a stadium. The assertion that fees could increase in the future without voter approval is factually incorrect. The IGA does not allow for an increase in fees related to the CPI or any other index over the life of the projects or of the agreement. It is a fixed fee for individuals. If you know what your fee is in 2016, it will be that way in 2036. I wanted to point out the comment about a supermajority required to approve projects within the city limits. There are some projects that we're pretty happy that are going to get done in our city. One of them is the Cimarron interchange. One of them is the Fillmore interchange. The widening of I-25. All of those things received a supermajority vote from the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments, from the Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority, because elected officials on the board understand that they are part of this community, and that's important. And without that supermajority vote, none of those projects would have been happening. So to cite that as a reason that we wouldn't get our fair shake, it's also sort of a slam in the face on 4 of 5 county commissioners who are also residents of the city, who would somehow have this veto authority and enjoy holding it over us and preventing any work from being done within our city. The authority will not retain any amount for administration fees. It merely sets a limit on what those fees can be. The city can manage its stormwater projects within its boundaries. That's the whole point. That's one of the things that's allowed within here. We just confirmed Travis Easton, who will be the Public Works Manager. He's perfectly able to handle projects inside the city. What this regional board will do is establish a set of priorities. If there's something within the city of Colorado Springs that would affect the region in a positive way and might prioritize one project over another, then that's the entire reason for having a regional priority. If it's less expensive for the region to do something within the city than to do it downstream, then the regional board will make that decision. That's what this is all about. It's cooperation. I know it's something that's not very prized by Mayor Bach, but this is something that we need to do. It's a problem. Water does not stop at boundaries. And I'll also say that we are not imposing this fee on anybody. We are acknowledging the due diligence of the Stormwater Task Force in putting together this IGA in the process that was open and public through I don't know how many public meetings, 70, 80, 90, which have all been vetted publicly, and allowing voters. Mayor Bach said that he trusts voters. If he trusts voters, he should allow them to make the determination. If he can sell his points to them, then it will fail, and we will have to, once again, find some other alternative. But since he's been mayor, there has been no long-term plan for stormwater issued. We haven't had anything come across the dais. We haven't seen any plans. And what he would like is to have all of the funding placed in his hands at his discretion. And I think this elected body, the Board of County Commissioners and other communities, have decided that it would be best for our community and our region to work together to solve this problem, which threatens the health, safety, and even the lives of residents. If citizens don't like this, they don't have to vote for it. It won't pass. This is not City Council imposing a fee. It is merely saying that if the fee is agreed to by the citizens, this is how it will be administered, and this is how it will be overseen and be transparent to the citizens who voted for it and expected it. I will support the IGA. I'm not sure I will vote for it on the ballot measure until I see the actual everything in front of me, and I look at what the impact will be to my family, and I will look at and consider what the impact of storms like the one that are going on have on the health and safety of our community. And I will make a decision as every other responsible voter in Colorado Springs will. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other comments? Councilmember Pico.
I'd just like to weigh in on a couple of points. First off, I second all of the comments already made by Councilmember Miller. This isn't a perfect thing. I mean, I've got some reservations about, everything that's in this thing, but we hammered through this thing in a collaborative fashion, and we brought in the community. It was wide open for the entire thing, as pointed out, 70, 80 meetings, town halls. It absolutely has been an open thing. Again, it isn't perfect, but I support what is going forward at this point. I noted that that the mayor zeroed in on the fact that we could raise the rates indefinitely and continue it beyond 20 years without voter approval. And in fact, the IGA sunsets at 20 years, period. So that's just factually not correct. On the issue of a flood emergency, if the mayor can get a binding agreement with the controlling authority about where natural disasters will occur, then I could probably agree with changing that. But since we can't, I think that 10% needs to go. And I know that's a controversial issue, and people here up in the dais in good faith disagree on that point, but I think it's one that absolutely has to stay in there. So again, this isn't perfect. It is, after all, government, but it has been a very collaborative, open process that's taken the best and has modified it quite a lot. And I support it going forward. We're not going to raise your fees. You are going to raise your fees. I support it going to a vote, and you tell us if we're on track or not. If not, then we'll come back with something else, and we'll live within the means we have within the city. But taking a look at what the city revenues are, and what can be allocated to flood control projects, based upon the list that has been developed both by the task force and by the mayors independently process work. It would be a 100-year program building projects with a 30-year lifetime each, and it just simply doesn't solve the problem. So we'll support this going forward, and we'll take the judgment of the voters.
Further comments? Councilmember Collins.
Like I stated, I will not support the IGA, but I do hope that people really look at this in depth. I sent out some emails. I'm on the City Finance Committee, and the total 2014 anticipated spending is around $25 million. So it's not like we aren't doing anything in the city. The mayor has been addressing concerns, and I know as a representative Southeast, the concerns that I've addressed from drainage have been looked at heavily by Public Works, and they've been addressed. Thank you.
Further comments? Councilmember Knight.
Yes, I have a question for either Mr. Walker or Mr. Munger, please. When this was before us 2 weeks ago, the sole reason I voted no on it was because the 10% that goes into the emergency fund, as Mr. Munger said, was set as a grant and not a loan. And from the outset, when I was talking to CSU, Carol and Mark, a year ago, more than a year ago, they asked me what it would take. And I said we would have to get our money back on a rolling average. That's why I voted no against it, because there was specific language in the version that we had in front of us on there that specifically said the 10% was exempt. I know that's the intent. That's the intent of many here on council, that money be exempt. But as I continue to read it, the draft that's in front of us now over and over again, I just don't see that language in there anymore to where it's exempt. In fact, I'm looking at it, in other words, in each 5-year period, an amount of revenue equal to that collected within a given jurisdiction, less administrative expenses, It doesn't say anything else, doesn't say less the emergency fund, just less the administrative expenses shall be used to fund capital improvements and operation and maintenance within a jurisdiction. And if you go down, I know I was referred down later to 5I, or subparagraph 5 under section C there, that talks about the emergency funding. That language is duplicative of the language for capital improvement and the language for the other in there. So I know it's the intent, and just in fairness to all my other council members, that is, they think they're voting on that. I just don't see it in there. Can you help point me out in there to where that language is?
Councilman Knight, members of the council, my name is Kevin Walker. I'm the consultant to the Regional Stormwater Task Force. And we made our recommendation to the council. The council and the commissioners, along with their attorneys, have done a lot of work on this. And I would defer really that question to your attorney to do that. I don't think I want to try to interpret a 20 or 30-page document that has been drafted a lot by attorneys. I think that your attorney is more than adequately briefed on that and can answer that question for you.
Okay.
If I may, you have to look at the totality of Section 6, subsection C to look at this. And what the agreement does is it very carefully divides the 55% for capital improvements, the 35% for operation and maintenance, and the 10%. So if we look at 6C1, where it talks about allocation of drainage and flood control capital improvements, it says 55% of net revenue shall be placed in a special fund. It goes on, and then it says, to or for the benefit of each of the parties in a pro rata manner on a 5-year running average based on revenues collected. Okay, so that the capital improvements is intended to be distributed back to the participating jurisdictions on a 5-year rolling average basis. So then if we scroll down to Section 4, where it starts talking about O&M, it's a mirror language. 35% of net revenue should be placed in a special fund dedicated within drainage and flood control, operation and maintenance. And again, the same language, prorated based on a 5-year running average upon the revenue collected from the respective jurisdiction. So then when we go down to Section 5, the language changes. And we no longer have the magic language about the pro rata redistribution of this. It's simply 10% that goes into a special fund. The language we have here says that 10% of net revenue shall be placed in a special fund dedicated to drainage and flood control planning and flood-related emergency needs. These funds shall be used only for planning and annual contributions to emergency contingency fund for flood-related emergencies as determined by a supermajority vote of the PPRDA Board of Directors. So in that Section 10, there's none of the pro rata language. So the intent of the agreement here, and I think the understanding of all the parties and the attorneys associated with it, is that the 10% is a special fund that's set aside to deal with the flood-related emergency needs and planning. And there's not an intent for it to come back to specific communities, but instead to be allocated and used as the supermajority of the board sees fit.
Okay.
Well, in that case,
Go ahead.
if I just wrap up, then while there's a lot of Herculean work been done on this, and I salute and applaud everybody's contribution to it, I'm got to, again, vote against it solely for that one function.
Other comments? Councilmember Miller.
I just wanted to add a couple things I forgot. One of the things that people overwhelmingly after 10 years of the PPRTA, Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority, one of the reasons it passed with a seemingly, we had a briefing on this yesterday, large majority with I think 55% when it was first passed. When it was passed for the second time around in 2012, it was over 80% approval, I believe, 80 or maybe 78. And the reason is because taxpayers said, we're agreeing to this, and they did what they said they were going to do. And they provided transparency in how the money was spent. It didn't go into a black hole that nobody could see. I think that's one of the things that makes this particular approach, whatever approach we have, we need to do something. But this approach, I think, at least provides transparency and the fact that there are elected representatives serving on the board, exclusively elected officials who are accountable to the people and accountable to the next election. I want to say a quick word on nonprofits. You know, nonprofits are very important to us, and I support the tax exemption issue. This is an issue of when you have a nonprofit that creates a huge amount of runoff, you are affecting other people. In the collection of other taxes, you are affecting with the runoff. If you have a 5-acre parking lot, you are adding to the stormwater issue. And as much as you like to be able to not charge anybody, if the voters approve this setup for it, it is reasonable to expect that if you're adding to the runoff problem, that you at least pay in some measure your contribution toward that. And I think that's a reasonable expectation. And then I wanted to say something about the folks who are southeast, because the alternative that's been presented is a sales tax. People say that's a lot more fair. And I think that if you are, somebody is working poor, and you are now paying for as much in your sales tax as you might be in any of your other essential things that you're trying to provide for yourself and your family, what you purchase at Walmart is now going to help solve the stormwater problem that you didn't contribute to if you're living in an apartment building. So I think that there can be arguments made on every side of this issue. I think it is in a shape that it's available, and I think it's reasonable for citizens to take a look at it as educated citizens who will research how it affects them and how it affects our community. I trust what the citizens will decide in April. Or, yes, April. No, sorry, I've got municipal election in my mind, in November.
Okay, further comments? I would just like to say, from my perspective, this is a very challenging issue to look at and say, how do we, as government, come and address one of the issues that needs to be addressed and taken care of, and is it best to do it in a city method, or is it better to do it in a regional method? And I think, in looking at all the different ways that we could have funded this, I think by the water running in and out of the city, it doesn't know city boundaries. I think the regional solution was by far the best solution, and I supported that solution to this problem. I think the difficulty for all of us is the issue of how do we pay for infrastructure? How do we go about biting the bullet, so to speak, to make these type of infrastructure needs necessarily to be done? It's like a school building to a school district. It's like trying to find a way to accomplish what we need to accomplish for the betterment of our community. And I think that we are allowing the voters the opportunity to say they think that we have made the right decision, and we are trying to accomplish what we need to accomplish to take care of the stormwater and take care of our obligations. I think we have obligations to Pueblo downstream, and I think we have obligations to make sure that we are doing what is necessary from our perspective to be able to make sure that the flow of the fountain is in such a way that it doesn't do harm to people downstream that are also involved with this particular watershed. So I'm supportive of this process. I think we did a lot of great work. It was Councilmember Snyder and Councilmember Martin spent enormous amounts of time on this. We had lots of us put in a lot of time and energy into this to try and make it as good as possible. And I think we have come up with a reasonable approach. I like the fact that it does not escalate at all during the 20 years. It is a fixed fee that will not escalate. And I think that it will be something that we can get to work and try to make sure that we are accomplishing what needs to be done for the stormwater in our region, so that we have an effective management of that and do the things that we should with this. So I will be supporting it. One final comment, there's nothing that says that the county has to make a fee off of this. It doesn't have to go on to the property tax bill. It can if that's the choice of the governing board, but I think that it's important to note that that's not necessarily required. So I think this is something that we can give an opportunity for people to make their decisions on how they want to vote, and give them an opportunity to speak their mind on it, so. Any other comments? Okay, let's vote. That passes on a 7-2 vote.